Welcome into Off Air with Amy. We are here one week again with so much information on the way. We've got some fun at the end involving Halloween and cool driving tours you can take of the scariest and coolest houses in the upstate. But first, we're going to talk about a serious issue. This is one that you may have heard about because it involves the abortion bill that is in South Carolina that is under consideration. It's in committee at this point, but it has gotten a lot of headlines, a lot of attention. The abortion bill in South Carolina is considered to be the strictest in the nation, and it criminalizes some of the behavior, not only for the patient, but also even physicians and others. It is an interesting bill. It's one that's getting a lot of discussion, making massive headlines pretty much consistently in the papers, but they just had a committee hearing, and there is a local doctor from Greenville who was there to testify. His interest in this subject really isn't about abortion. It's about IVF. He helps parents who can't have children on their own find success through in vitro fertilization so they can have the family they've dreamed of. And he is, first of all, hearing from his patients. Second of all, really concerned about what it could do to the opportunities for South Carolina moms and dads of the future. And so I've pulled him in to get his take on this bill, not really talking about abortion, but about how this bill on personhood could impact IVF.
So let's start off with the most important thing, which is that you went before South Carolina lawmakers to explain why you think this bill is bad for infertility. Why was that so important to you?
Yeah, so I did it honestly for advocacy for my patients. I've seen a lot of patients that have needed IVF, and we can explain obviously and get into details later. But this bill really threatens their access to the treatment that they need, and so I kind of took it upon myself and others on our quote team who asked me to come speak to say, this is important. We're going to make this time, and we did it, and hopefully we had an impact.
So talk about your testimony, because you were talking about this fertility treatment options, how many people now require some kind of assistance to actually have a family, and the definition, I guess, of personhood in this bill is what makes everything so dicey.
Right. So, I'm all about perspective, and that's actually what I put in my testimony. And so, just some of the numbers that are important to what you just alluded to. Infertility affects 1 in 6 people, and so it is unfortunately not rare, and it is a medical diagnosis that needs the proper treatment. And IVF accounts for about 1 in 40 children born in the United States every year. And so it's about 2.6% of the population being born each year in the United States. And so we know that it's an important and vital treatment option for many patients. And I can go into it, but there are some patients who absolutely need to do IVF in order to have their genetically owned child. And so when this personhood verbiage comes in that you alluded to, we have the precedent in Alabama, and that was brought up a year ago. Alabama passed this personhood and law, and immediately their IVF center shut down, all of them.
Wow.
So patients that were in the midst of an IVF cycle, literally maybe having their frozen embryo transferred the next day, they were canceled because of the potential liability that this personhood bill, because personhood gives human rights, or the same rights that we have, to a frozen embryo, about a few hundred cells. And so unfortunately, it put a lot of patients in limbo, and luckily or fortunately, the legislature and the lawmakers down in Alabama quickly realized this, and within a few days, they carved out the niche for IVF, and then they were allowed to progress. But it has lasting effects in Alabama. Some hospitals aren't even doing fertility treatments because of that potential law on the books. And so when I saw that in this bill, it was very important for me to go speak up for my patients.
And this committee apparently is taking into consideration what has been said. They sound like they might even, change a few things before they push it forward. You don't have any read on whether that would be sort of the elements that you address, do you?
I don't, honestly. I did read shortly, actually the next day, I did read that the bill is, quote, on hold for refinement, whatever that means.
Okay.
There is a bill, actually, that I went to the State House for last year, actually for this very reason of what we were just talking about happened in Alabama, to carve out IVF from this personhood verbiage that they're discussing. So if that bill could gain more kind of in terms of popularity and be put back on the books, maybe that could help us as well. So hopefully, and that was mentioned in the testimony last week. So hopefully that could come back and help us and help our patients in regard to IVF.
Talk a little bit. You explained some of the scenarios, life circumstances that hit people that they go, wait a minute, I'm at this age where I haven't had kids yet, but I still want to have them. Like I got diagnosed with cancer, or I'm going into the
Right.
military, or all these different scenarios. Talk about some of that, about why people, wind up sometimes even having to strategize about families.
Right. And that was one of my biggest talking points, quite honestly. You again alluded to some of the ones that I talked about. So, as I mentioned, there are patients who absolutely have to do IVF to have their genetically owned child. And we talk about patients such as those facing a cancer diagnosis who may have to undergo chemotherapy, which would render them subfertile or infertile. And with
Hmm.
IVF, we can actually create their embryos prior to their chemotherapy, freeze those embryos, and then once they are in remission, they can come back for those embryos and have their child and have a pregnancy. I also talk about the folks, the 1 in 5,000 women who are actually born without a uterus. They have their
Hmm.
ovaries, but they have eggs, and so they can do IVF, have their genetically owned child carried by a gestational carrier or a surrogate, and have that child that way. Women and men in our military, I mentioned that as well. If they are for some reason exposed to an agent or have an accident or are injured that will render them infertile, we can do the same thing as I mentioned in terms of leading into a cancer diagnosis. We can freeze their embryos prior to them being deployed, and hopefully they will not need them. But it's a sort of an insurance. And I had a patient kind of tell me it's like a safety net for that. And so it really can help a tremendous amount in a lot of scenarios in terms of patients wanting their genetically owned child.
Yeah, interestingly, so I'm a child of adoption,
Mhm.
but I also have my own biological children, and I see so many reasons why families do want that genetic child, because now that I have the biological connection, it is so cool, in my life. But
Right.
but but adoption is always an option, right? But I
Of
just think
course.
it's such an interesting desire in our hearts, right, to have our family to be biologically connected. Your patients clearly care a lot about that.
They do, and it. I always say that the drive to be a parent, either a mother or father, is very strong. And when
Mm.
it's that is put on hold for either a medical diagnosis or whatever scenario, that is very difficult. And what we also have to understand is the stress that comes along with the diagnosis of infertility and trying for X amount of
Yes,
months or years to have your own child.
sure.
There was a study not long ago that came out that the stress of a cancer diagnosis is on par with the level of a fertility diagnosis in terms of stress management and stress for the patient. So we're not blind to that either. And so we understand the struggles, and all we're trying to do is advocate for our patients and give them what we think is the best medicine. And this is a tried and true treatment, quite honestly, with millions and millions of people being born through through IVF around the world. And so we're trying to save that for our patients in South Carolina.
And for the state of South Carolina, if this bill were to go through as is, what would it do to your patients and to you?
Right. So it would be a lot like Alabama. We would have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what are we going to do with the process of IVF? And I'll mention that in a second. And then what are we going to do with frozen embryos? Because even in, former patients might have frozen embryos because they may want to build their family further later on. And so they have those right now. And so in Alabama, what happened, the carrier, so, you can ship embryos to a long-term storage, have to ship them back to the fertility clinic to have the transfer and try to get pregnant. Carriers were saying there's too much liability. They're not even going to touching Alabama. So that's one potential that could happen in South Carolina, that we would have patients kind of on hold in terms of trying to get their frozen embryos back into South Carolina if they're stored at a offsite location. In terms of physicians, I think what will happen is I think you will see physicians leaving the state. That's
Yeah.
happened in other states, especially in the OBGYN ranks as well. You see it in Texas and Idaho where there's just deserts of care, unfortunately. That could happen. But also in terms of, IVF won't necessarily shut down, but what will happen is it will increase the cost for patients, because if we're not creating a number of embryos to try to have the success because of these personhood bills, then we're doing more rounds per patient, if that makes sense, because you need
Yeah.
more rounds to get more embryos to get a live-born
Mm.
child. Because the overarching kind of thought is it takes 2 quality embryos to have 1 live-born child. That's not everybody, but that's just an average. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we're having to do repeat cycles, that's going to drive the cost up. It's going to decrease the success rate
Yeah.
because each cycle you're only going to have 1 or 2 embryos. And we know that not all embryos, unfortunately, are going to
Right.
continue to develop, implant, or have a live-born child. And that's in nature or in IVF.
Sure.
And then again, decreased access. Patients will seek care elsewhere if they can. That's only if they can. And so that's going to increase the cost if they have to go out of state as well.
Is it frustrating? I know when people testify in these scenarios, so often you're used to like going before some setting and making an argument and then getting some feedback, but you get nothing, do you? You just say what you got to say,
Right.
and then you leave, and you're like, I hope
Yeah.
that worked. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I did not receive any feedback. I did get a question or two, but it is frustrating when you look at the panel, as you said, and it's nothing against them. I'm just trying to
Oh yeah.
educate because this is what we do. There, quite frankly, they may not be used to seeing any of this from a medical standpoint, and so I'm trying to
Sure.
educate them as best we can. But you're right. Without any feedback, it's difficult. I guess the feedback may come in the sense that the bill will be either refined in a positive way for us or not at all. Well, that's to be seen.
Yeah, and when the centerpiece of it is focused on abortion, all these other issues that surround, they can get lost in the clutter of the focus, correct?
You're absolutely right. They did, this bill. Yes, it's the Unborn Child Protection Act, and it's a lot of focus on abortion. But they have thrown a lot of different things into this. That if it's approved, those also will be approved, and this personhood and effects on IVF are definitely there, and that's why I decided I wanted to speak up again as an advocate for my patients.
Are you hearing from patients? Are they worried, concerned, wondering what to do?
You know, we hear from it all. We hear about it all the time, quite honestly, especially, when, again, going back to the Alabama thing, we had patients ask us, do I need to ship my embryos somewhere out of state?
Mm,
Those were legitimate concerns. Or do
sure.
I need to go ahead and have an embryo transfer now because something may change and like it did in Alabama, and I may not be able to in the near
Hmm.
future. So all those questions, and again, it goes back to the stress that it causes the patients. All those questions come up to the surface when these sorts of things happen, of course.
Well, doctor, you do a great job on social media. I want to encourage our audience. I'm going to put up your
Thank you.
social media, Instagram here, so that people can get in touch with you and follow
Sure.
you. Not just on this issue, but if you're interested in infertility or understanding it better, you do a great job of explaining it and kind of bringing it into layman's language and what's
Thank you.
going on in the field. So thank you for being a light of information and facts about how this works, and we appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your insight on this bill and what's at stake for families who really care about IVF.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Our can't miss segment, we have got something to tell you about on the clock tower. That controversy has finally led to a settlement. The judge actually never came back with a ruling. Instead, the leaders of the group that was fighting against the movement of the clock and the destruction of the clock, they reached an agreement with the city to go ahead and have the clock moved to a new location where they will reconstruct it. So they see that as a win. They haven't decided the place of where that will be yet, but apparently it's going to be put back up and sort of reconstructed somewhere in the Spartanburg vicinity where the community can still enjoy it. So big update on the clock tower. So when we come back, we've got something good. I mean, really good. We're talking about spooky season is here. And as you're seeing these houses cross your screen, I'm going to give you all the details you need to be able to take these driving tours to see all of them. It's all been organized by one of my favorite websites in the upstate, so stick around. I'll have more when we come right back. Welcome back into Off Air with Amy. There are some really cool things going on when it comes to holiday season spirit. And we are in the spooky season before we get to Christmas and the rest. And I got to tell you, there is a place that has all of the options under one roof. And when it comes to family information, it's a great place to go. So I've pulled in my friends from Kidding Around Greenville because they have put together this driving list where you can pick a community and then they have all these houses that they've ranked with how scary they are to how kid friendly. And it's a really cool effort on their part to make the spooky season really fun.
So it is Halloween season, and there's nothing spookier than going to see the spookiest houses in the upstate. And I know every year, Kidding Around Greenville and Kristina Hernandez and Bethany and the whole gang, you guys put together so many great pieces of content that help us as families find the good stuff. So once again, you've put together the tour of homes where you can kind of drive around and see all these spots. Talk a little bit about how you decide who gets on the list and who does not.
So that's a great question. So we actually base all of our like scare factors and decisions about who gets on the list based on this one home. It's the Haunted Castle of Malden is their name.
Ooh.
And yeah, so it's on our Malden Simpsonville route. And this house is completely insane. They have like all the clowns, like werewolves, like
Wow.
demons, headless
Ooh.
kids, aliens with in Santa costumes, and it kind of spreads along like a block. And so that's the house that we always base our list off of. And we're like,
Yeah.
well, how close can you come to this? And so, but we also look for fun ones too, because that one is pretty scary. And we
Hmm.
do a ranking of all the houses that are on every single one of our 5 routes based on that particular house. And so the Malden route is actually our creepiest one because there's another house that's nearby. It's actually 4 or 5 houses on the same street that do something
Wow.
similar and
Hmm.
almost as scary. So yeah. That's how we come up with it. And we drive past almost all of the houses to make sure that, they're worthy to be on the list.
And talk a little bit about the variety, right? Because you're going to have moms and dads with 5-year-olds, and then preteens who want to go drive around, or
Yeah.
teenagers who want to go driving around. They're definitely going to go to that Malden spot. So let's talk about like how people do tell. You said you're rating them. So what kind of rating would be good for the younger kids?
So the ones that are rated like 1 or 2 are probably better for smaller kids, but I mean, I've been to some pretty like scary haunted houses. I don't really like super scary things and I
Yeah, I
can
don't
deal with
either.
these.
Okay,
Yeah, but some of these places, I mean, we've seen kids at them, and so I think it really just depends on
your
how your kid
child.
reacts.
Hmm.
Yeah. And how you present it. But some of these, like there's one that has like a blow up octopus that looks like it's coming out of the house in
Wow.
on our Five Forks route. Yeah, and it's really funny. And there's some of them that are doing like a tinsel scary themed one where they
Okay.
have like the skeletons dressed up as the character and elf like holding
Oh,
a skull, and I was like that's just funny.
yeah,
So
it's funny.
some of them are like that, and others really go all out. I mean, I don't know how these people like store their scary
The
stuff in the
stuff, yeah.
non-Halloween season because I wouldn't want to run into that in my house anymore.
Yeah, and then you wonder what Christmas is like. It's like,
Yeah.
wow. All right, let's talk a little bit about where these routes are. So you mentioned the Malden route. So what parts of the upstate are you kind of focused on?
So we have 5 routes there: North Greer, South Greer, Five Forks, Malden, Simpsonville, and Greenville. And so the Greenville ones are closer to downtown. Five Forks is obviously all in Five Forks. Simpsonville and Malden, that's probably our longest route actually. And just in terms of space, and it'll probably take you about an hour. And then we have North and South Greer, and we have so many homes, and there's also ones that are great, but they're not anywhere near where we could put them on a route. So they are on
Hmm.
our map and they are in our story because they're super cool. Like there's one that looks like it's on fire
Wow.
in Mountain Inn, but we didn't really have like other houses down there that we could add it to a route. But we put it on our map because I mean it's really cool. And just don't
Yeah.
call the fire department on it
Yeah,
because it's really not on fire.
it's really not on fire. Good to
Yeah.
know. What kind of reaction do you get from families? I mean, you guys keep doing this, so obviously people love it.
So they start asking us for this list in like August, and we have to tell people to hold their horses because people don't actually start decorating until like the end of September. And then
Yeah.
it's like crunch time for me and then a couple of our other writers. Like we each take a route and then we fill in the gaps where like we weren't able to get to the houses, and it all happens in about a week. And we just pray for good weather and that none of us are like completely exhausted to go out at night to do this. But we get so many good responses from this, and people they not only want the list, but they also want to know how to get on the list, like starting in August. And I mean, I'm just impressed. Like people go all out. I don't personally, and so I really like seeing other people who do.
Yes, please do it for me.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't have to do it. So these folks are fantastic. They're all over the region. Talk about, there's no cost, right? I mean, other than your gas driving around.
No, my kids and I, we like to make popcorn, and there's actually a Spotify list that we put in our story if people really want to like get in the Halloween mood. Some of these houses though, like I would rather, I'm listening to not spooky music because they're already scary enough.
Spooky enough.
But yeah, it's totally free thing to do. I mean, it's our families are on budgets, and here's something that you don't need to pay for. Yep. Just drive around, pop some popcorn and pray the kids can sleep at night.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe go, not too late.
Yeah.
In terms of any other Halloween exciting announcements or resources that families can find, are you doing trick-or-treating stuff? I mean, like what kind of other lists or stuff are you putting out in this spooky season?
Yeah, so we have an entire Halloween guide, and it has, as many Halloween trunk or treats, fall festivals, events that we can find. I mean, there's more than 100 on our list.
Wow.
And we also have a story in there about fall festivals, about where like the best neighborhoods to go trick or treating are at, because some families, they live in apartments and they don't really have a space to go trick or treating. And so we've asked our readers in the past where they like to take their kids. And a lot of them gave some really good recommendations for neighborhoods to do that in. Our list is just enormous. And so that's
it gets bigger every year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Year after year, the more the area grows, the more the wonderful things we have to do here grow as well, right? I'm sure noticed that.
It really does, which is great. I mean, Greenville, I couldn't imagine raising my family anywhere else. I absolutely love it here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Off Air with Amy. I hope families will get the information they need. I'm going to have a QR code up throughout this conversation so that people will be able to zoom on over to the haunted driving routes and see which one they want to pick.
Thanks for watching Off Air with Amy. We hope you have a fantastic Halloween season. There is so much to do, and there's many more things you can learn about across the upstate, including on WSPA.com. So make sure you're checking it out, search Halloween, and get all the details. We did do a really cool feature on this house right here. Do you see it? It is incredible. They've done it as if it was on fire. Just insane video, and apparently it's even cooler in person. So all the driving information is on my social media. Thanks for watching this week. I'll see you soon. There's something comforting about experience. It prepares you, makes you wiser, ready for anything. That's why 3 decades later, I still love to keep you informed. Your trust is everything.
Watch Amy Wood on 7 News. Weekdays at 4, 5, and 6 p.m.
We want to get to that immediately.